I just felt so lucky coming into Koha school and realising that they were living and breathing Lane Park process. So that was really my first taste of putting it into action, except for about a month at my first school. So, and as a new teacher, obviously when you're kind of fairly brand new in the first year of teaching, it's really neat when somebody jumps up and down and puts something in your face that is actually a process that like people having a lot of success with, and not just all compartmentalised kind of units and things. So, but then having to go back to the old way of doing it for a few years was really quite horrible. So anyway, so when I started here, because I'd been working with kind of an older model since I started teaching, I'm going to be really honest here. I really found it hard. My first year at Gulf Harbour was, I thought I was a good teacher until I came to Gulf Harbour.
Well, you only resided 3
times.
And
then I was convinced I was a terrible teacher and I didn't know how to do anything for a good year, probably 2 years actually, really. So that was just that whole reality of chucking out one way of doing it, which I thought was really good, and trying a new way which I believed in, but my practice didn't change. So as much as I believed it up here, what I did day to day kept reverting back to what I was used to. So I only really, apart from having last year off, I only really feel like I've gone through the inquiry process fairly successfully, if you can say that, probably 3 or 4 times. And each of those times I went back and did it again. I'd probably do it completely different anyway. But probably this year would probably be the first, or even this last inquiry, I think it's probably the first year that it has actually felt like I lived and breathed it. It's like a language. It's almost like it's something that somebody kind of puts on you, like you go into a country, and then it's not until you live there for a couple of years you start thinking in that language that it starts to feel like you know it. So it's basically felt like that, and I really think people that come in, especially experienced teachers, because of that my own experience with that. So, but what I can say, it's worth persevering because the fruits of just working completely with examples of authenticity and things that are real life, that to me is why I teach. So I feel more comfortable doing it now because it hasn't come easy. It's taken a while, and I look at some of these ones that do start new, especially younger BTs that sort of come out of college and bang into Gulf Harbour, and they pick it up so fast. I think, God, why couldn't I pick it up that fast? Anyway, so this was the one that we all started off with, obviously. So we did a quick little immersion, very quick, just into what makes a great volunteer. And our immersion pretty much really boiled down to having the speakers that came in. Really, we knew that we only had well, really it was only about a 10-week time frame by the time we were going to create the readers. So we had to do this part super fast. But we had enough volunteers that came in to give us the idea of how to be, just to get that feeling of giving from the kids. So during that first 2-week process, the main organisers that we used were mind mapping, different ways of giving, types of volunteers, and then getting into what makes a volunteer. And we did do a little mini think at grade, although we didn't sort of go right through and do the hypothesis and the last bit of it. But we got into the Venn diagrams and discoveries, wonderings, and worked out what our criteria would be for us that term, so what we would like to be like. And so having the people coming in and ensuring that was key to us getting to that stage. So we just used the same organiser as some of you that Margot did. We kept this part really simple because we were busy planning the next week at break, so we didn't want to spend too much time. If we had more time, we would have. Anyway, so we needed the motivation to get into the actual thing, that we were going to do. So we had to take the elements of how we wanted to be and turn it into something that we could achieve. So having come in and talk to us was enormous, and it really sparked off the idea of making the readers feel smart. So yeah, having that person that's still in our school was really cool for the kids, because that was something they see from day to day as well. And yeah, so we decided to become great volunteers by creating the readers and helping them to learn English, because their sort of job opportunities are quite limited, and they often come to places like New Zealand to work and stuff, or they work in tourism, a lot of them, so they know a bit of English, it just gives them a bit of sense. So the kids really understood that, because we had quite a few new ESOL kids in the class, so they really knew what that meant to those kids. So Max and I got together and did a bit of a timeline of what we thought we would do, and we realised that we were really going to have to get cracking. So we spent 3 weeks by the time we got Melissa to come in and meet the volunteers and things like that. So we decided we needed to have a logo, so Max kindly came up with the name. We mentioned Koha. Well, I came up with the name. Max, of course, does all the beautifying. I don't click it out class. I just have an idea, and you know what it's like. And
the good thing about Max is it always comes out better. Or, you know, it's like, whoa.
Marriage name.
Yeah. Now everybody's going to want you Max. So we did have a good look at the tools chart first up, because we did that after our immersion actually, sorry. Can't feel real there. To see what tools and skills we used through the immersion. And it was amazing. It's quite amazing how much they could actually colour in. So anyway, we went back into our immersion, so we just got, and you might have noticed junior teachers that a lot of the readers have been pulled out of the resource room. Hopefully we didn't make too much of an impact. But we basically got armfuls of readers, and especially at read level, because we decided that kind of just after the immersion level was kind of a good, it's fairly low level for it, but it's good for the smart kids. So they thought about that, and they, okay, yeah, so this was the start of our expert grade. Some of the activities we did, sort of over there and accompanied by Max there, but things like drawing your own characters in different positions. We did lots of arts. We tried to include all the senses. We did some maths in there, counting how many words in the books, how many pages in the books, and working out what the books had in common. From there as well. We looked at SMOA, our audience, so luckily Melissa was able to share a lot about that and the animals that she'd seen there. And we photographed some of our favourite characters out of other books, favourite books from home, explained why they were their favourites. And so we started just gathering data through this thing of discoveries and wonderings. If you have a little wander around later, you'll sort of see that sort of starts there with the volunteer, and then it comes down to that table there. Kind of the ideas and discoveries that the kids came up with at that early stage. Lots of drawing, lots of art, because we knew that those were skills that were going to be really important. Trying to work out what the messages were in the readers, if they had a message. Yeah, so we tried to include all the senses, kids brought in food, we used the computers obviously, a bit of writing, lots of counting. And then we realised that the first thing we had to do was get the characters, because without the characters you can't write the stories. So we got everybody to vote for their favourite characters, so we did that bit first. We looked at the top 4. That was based on the characters, I think, wasn't it, Max? Rather than the actual story or anything? The top 4, do you think? The decision seemed to be
we sort of felt like we had to restrict things a bit. So,
yeah.
You know, one of the problems with kids is that they want to do everything, and so we had to kind of create some gates, didn't we? Like, so one of them was we really restricted the number of characters, and we spent quite a lot of time creating them and refining them so that they had those, and that made the story writing a lot easier because they didn't start adding a million characters, and you know, so yeah.
That's organised and worked really well. Like, and obviously for the younger kids, having the photograph of the character from the book was far better than writing the name of the character and trying to do it any other way. That always seemed to work better with the children. So that, of course, dog was the most popular. It's just because it was personality, but also just the way he was drawn. So it was a bit of a crossover between what was picture and what was story. A lot of it was picture. It seemed to be for the kids really amusing. So then we went into a big chart, and we just kept it fairly basic. So we had on the left there we had for our diversity we had characters. We wanted them to get some ahas about repetition, so and punctuation, because punctuation was something a lot of kids didn't do particularly well with their writing anyway. If there was some sort of problem in the book, if there was humour, what happened at the end of the book. So they realised pretty quickly that the last page changed, so it kind of like repeat, and then last page is different. So that came out of this pretty quickly, and what they noticed about illustrations, because we knew we were going to have to do another chart for illustrations later on in more detail, but we didn't want to confuse them with that. We wanted to get them writing because we knew we had a short time frame. So, and obviously they came to the strengths and weaknesses, and their so what ideas were for what they would have in their story. So if it made any of those things they liked, they would, say, oh, I do that, or I do use that character, but I do it a little bit different. I'll make it personality like that. Or I wouldn't use a dog, I'd rather use a sea turtle, because sea turtles are smart. So a lot of this area here was our ideas for the next stage. And now this was just took over our literacy pretty much completely for a good 3-4 weeks. So we took that last organiser, the flip chart, we did that in groups. So when we had guided reading, get through our reads really quickly for home, and then we go straight into doing a Venn diagram. We put 2 groups together and mix them up. That's me taking some and I'm taking some. So we ended up with probably about 6 of these, no, probably 8 actually, different Venns, and I've chucked most of them out now. But just compared to, and before we actually came up with what they had. That's just one of them. And we had a look at this, which is my criteria for doing the diagram, and just get a little bit on that, how to get a good one. That was more useful. So those almost there are all just straight off the website. Okay, so we were up to, so we've done the chart, we've done our comparing, the Venn diagrams, and then we had to pull some of these things out of here and decide, by looking at other examples as well, which ones of those were the most important, because we had quite a few, because there were some others that weren't on the flip chart as well. There was quite a few others. So we were kind of at that stage there where we were going to test, we had a hypothesis, but it was a big one, we didn't know which ones were important, some of them we knew weren't, I didn't see that. So, and Max and I at this stage, we had pretty much preempted what we thought would come out, but actually it wasn't exactly what we thought. So most of it was, but not all. So so at this stage, it's quite possible that it's going to be difficult which it was. So this chart here. So the idea is that it's basically for testing the criteria. So if you have a look along the top here, there's a lot more along there than there was in our think chart. So that's what I mean by there was more to it than what we thought. So suddenly we had, the kids had already realised that there were all sorts of things about the contrast in the characters, the different types of punctuation. The repetition one was what we expected, the problem, we knew there was a problem, some sort of problem. That we kind of knew. Whether the message is suitable for young readers and pictures that explain text was sort of the same. This is what actually makes it, I don't think Max and I really knew this bit. We hadn't really looked into it that much. Yeah, so they had things like having fun in the water, which we'd still put in there because we, so that they'd see the crosses, because you don't want to make it all right, so you just see ticks everywhere. You've got to put in some of their ideas that you know are a bit random and aren't going to be part So yeah, and then of course we grabbed that from Lane's Bundle of Joy, and so they could see how to get 3 stars and do it really well, that chart. Otherwise some kids just go tick 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 without even thinking. Obviously in real junior classes and some of our kids as well, they have to actually do it with them. In fact, quite a few of our 3s and 4s we still did it with them in groups, the reading groups and stuff. So that's the list we came up with, as would be the elements that we all agreed would become a recipe for writing our own. So we decided they all had to be between 8 and 12 pages if they were going to be at red level, because we wanted them to be similar level, because we wanted to make a series of books at the same level. Yeah. So they had the recipe, so that got turned into a rubric. Now, it took me a long time to know what the heck a rubric was. I mean, people used to say the word as if you're supposed to know what it is. And honestly, quite a few times I was too embarrassed to ask what the heck a rubric was. So, but it was a while before I actually worked it out. And as far as making one goes, really, I mean, I used some of Lane's ones and thought that's cool. But when I actually really sit down and make my own for the first time, I actually had to really think about it. Now, I did that, then showed it to Max, and then we changed it again. I think the next day we probably changed it again, didn't we? It was like, yeah. It was really hard to, because you can't always line them up too, because some things are just not relevant to every column. And yeah, so we played around with that one quite a lot. And then Max turned my stars into crabs, and I put the stars back on. Yeah, so the recipe definitely did end up being a little bit different. So when the children go to write their reader, they were motivated because they didn't want to get 1 crab or 1 star, they wanted to get 3 of each, so they were all aiming there. And when they went through the process of making it on paper first, we stuck the rubric on the back so that they could refer and have a look and see how they're going. So we really set them up for success so that they kept coming back to have a look rather than going to 1, 2, 3 stars. So yeah, they had the recipe, they had the criteria, and off they went. So the characters, we had to go back to that other one that we did when we voted for the readers as well, and look at the characters in a bit more detail. We had looked at Smo at this stage too and filled out an organiser about Smo, which is over there, you can have a look at later. We had a bit of a stumbling block here because if you can see up here, I actually did one at home just for fun on Keynote, what I thought it could be like, because we were really scared that we'd go away. We didn't want them to use a writing book because they just go away and write a story like they normally do. So we knew we wanted them to, that's why Max idea. We've got to give them, make it look like a reader from day one, so they don't go and go and do it the other way. So we gave them all little paper booklets like that, and yeah, and then we realised that they still probably weren't going to come up with really good, simple story ideas because they had 3s and 4s that probably make it too detailed on other things. So we ended up, sorry, I put that out. That was the one about the culture of the audience. We actually went back to the organiser that they did earlier on, and we went back and went into more detail. That's why I put it there. So we had a point where we made puppets. Yeah. We had a point where we made the puppets of the characters, and we put on the back, you got one there, Claire? And we put on the back their personalities. Oh, they're just there. And we just popular. They're just on their slips or something. We just put their personalities on the back so that they would go and kind of like take a character off the table and go and on the back they could see what they're supposed to act like and act out the characters and sort of get into the character of it. So that was quite cool, but then they all went off on a tangent about puppets. It was all about puppets, so we had to get them back from there. But they did have story ideas, so it was worth doing. So then we had to... Yeah, so then we were thinking, oh God, we haven't got much time left, we've got to get into drawing them. So, because we realised that you couldn't split the writing and drawing up, you had to have them together with this age group. So we thought as they started to read, we did the illustrations alongside because we would run out of time otherwise. So they started just having fun just drawing animals from Samoa. Obviously lots of mind maps were happening between this stage.
Well, those kind of things were happening a bit simultaneously. When we
Yeah,
started on the
also.
stories, we had the characters, but we were kind of refining them as well.
Yeah.
That sort of happened a bit before the puppets.
Yeah, well, that was saying. That's my comment, so sorry. Yeah, then we got stewing because we realised that the characters look something pretty hard to draw. It's pretty hard to draw crab successfully. And we realised that a cartoony kind of style would be much easier for the children. So we thought we'll get stewing and he said, oh, why don't you make it look like this? So kids had already had a go first, so we let them have a go. And he also gave some ideas what their personalities would be like. You know, like crabs can be grumpy because as soon as they see you, they scuttle under a rock. And so he kind of like just sparked their imaginations. It's just great.
And that was quite key, I think, wasn't it, too? Because
Huge.
then we had the characters created, because that's another big hurdle, I think, for kids. When they're making their own books, they can't draw a character the same all the time.
No.
And you end up with books that look different. So that helped a lot.
Yeah. So we got them to look at what they look like, what personalities are like, what kind of like drawing style they would like, and what the animals like, so what they could call them. Oh, and then we made the puppets. Sorry, yeah, I jumped to puppets really. So just to get more story ideas, and the other thing which was pretty key, we guys were doing like this, was to get. Where's that box? Oh, here we go. We went and had a look through all the books at RLL, and we just got phrases out like that, and we threw them all into a bucket, like because we wanted to make sure that they had sort of ideas of and words, using words that were not too hard. Yeah, do you get what I mean? Just real basic phrases and settings like valleys and rock caves and waterfalls. So yeah, so they just mixed and matched a lot of ideas and they did the puppet kind of practice. Okay, so then they got to write them. This is the storm one, this is the storm here. This is the draft of the storm. And yeah, so they got the idea of just one sentence on a page, and they had to think about speech. They're really good with speech marks now. Yeah, they really got that through this process. Yeah, so and then we tested them out on Japanese students. We thought that they would learn English, so that would be good. And we just took it on the young guys on the team. So they gave us some feedback. And meanwhile, we were experimenting with watercolours, so that watercolours might be the easiest way to do the backgrounds, and they did the organiser of the illustration, great illustrations, and I really just modified Lane's one